Melanie, you've spoken to legislators about how the lack of technological transparency has created loopholes in some existing AI laws other states have passed. What problems have those loopholes created, and what can elected officials do to avoid those same mistakes here?
So I think this is really early days. So we don't quite know the effects, right? The bills that have been passed in the last weeks, months. And so I think what this really points to is we have to recognize that there are going to be loopholes, that there's not going to be perfect legislation. And I think a really important piece of the puzzle is to evaluate what the AI is doing, what impact it's having on people's lives, and what the legislation is and is not preventing. And having that feedback so that legislators are in the habit of, we've got to reevaluate. We thought that we were preventing deepfakes in elections with this legislation. Did it work? And if it did work, okay, good. Is there anything we need to strengthen? If it didn't work, where were those loopholes? I think many of the loopholes will be found after the fact. There's certainly loopholes that sort of companies don't want to be forced to be transparent, either for intellectual property reasons or for the labor that would have to go into showing, right, this is our algorithm. We have tested it against all of these populations and shown that it is fair in all of these conditions. That's work that someone has to do.
That's why they would want to keep it secret.
So that would be a reason to not reveal it. So that's one reason that we have loopholes. But another is that simply at this point, I think, not possible to fully predict how these things will play out in the real world.
Right.
So this technology it's very new. As we've said, it's very hard to understand exactly how these machines are making decisions. And so it's even harder to understand what the implications will be when we put this in our complicated real world with bureaucracies and rules about how we do and habits of how we do and don't do things.
Plus it's learning.
It's learning in some
Okay.
sense. So most of the systems that are there now are not learning in real time. It depends on the nature of the system, whether it's able to take in new information sort of in real time, or do you have to wait for the next release of, GPT-5
Right.
or whatever before you get something that's new?
So last legislative session, a bill was introduced that would have required all state agencies to track all AI systems the state uses and note when the systems makes a consequential decision, in quotes.
Right.
So Chris, how can a transparency bill like this change the relationship the state has with existing AI systems?
Well, so that bill, which didn't pass, although it made it through a couple of committees in the House. Of course, it was a short session, so
Right.
lots of things didn't happen last year. That was a strong but narrow bill. It was specifically about government use of AI, and within that narrow confine, it was pretty strong. It really demanded that we know how the AI works, which is exactly what we're just talking about. That a lot of the vendors don't want to reveal that, and I think the point is that if the government makes a decision about you that affects your life, that says, no, you're not eligible for this social service or something, or maybe we're going to carry out some punitive action on you, I think you as a citizen in a democratic society deserve a pretty clear explanation of why. And it's not okay for the person on the other end of the phone to say, computer says no. That's not okay. We tolerate that in the private sector sometimes. We don't like it.
Yeah.
It infuriates us when someone in customer service says, "Oh, that's the policy," and the modern version is, "Oh, that's what the computer says. That's what the AI says." So I think governments do have enough purchasing power to say to vendors, "Hey, we're open to having you bid on all sorts of projects, but we want a relatively transparent product." I don't think in practice that turns the industry away. It's a different business model, but it does exist out there and companies make money off it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the private sector, like where we're talking about banking and housing, I'm not sure what level of transparency is politically feasible. I would like the more the better. Of course, human decisions are not always transparent as well, right? I mean, it used to be the landlord could just say no because they don't like how you dress or the length of your hair. And, that wasn't okay, but fine.
Or the color of your skin, or... Yeah.
Right, or the color of your skin. But if the whole point of AI is that it's going to make society better, doesn't that also include making decisions in a more clear and accurate and fair way? And so if we can't even tell how accurate and fair they are, why use it?
This year, Melanie, the New Mexico signed into law a rule that requires political campaigns and candidates to tell the public when they use false information generated by AI in a campaign ad. However, some elected officials and the governor have questioned how this rule will be enforced, as the state doesn't have AI investigators. What more should elected officials do to either strengthen or expand their protections against harmful political deepfakes?
So I think that how this is playing out right now is that, when something is suspected of being a deepfake, right, there are these people out there in the world on social media and things like that who investigate it and will point to it. Whether we have provable, very clear analysis of what is a deepfake and what is not, that's going to be something that's sort of a cat and mouse game. The deepfakes are going to get better, the deepfake detectors are going to get better, and there might be times when things can slip through the cracks. This is again why having some sort of a commission of experts that's able to draw from sort of the best that's technically available to advise on this is the right way to even make the determination, was this a deepfake or not. I think so far there have not yet been controversies. I think most of the deepfakes, maybe all of the deepfakes that, I guess by definition, all of the deepfakes we're aware of, right, they're sort of easily detectable at this point. But again, that might change. And so this is a place where the legislation's got to keep up with the technology, not because it's written into law, we will detect deep fakes using this, these processes and these tools, but because there is a sort of an ecosystem in place of people who are able to identify, tools and techniques for doing that sort of work. And I think that's something that the state really, it will be in the benefit of the state to investigate it, invest in that sort of capability. Whether I'm a bit more concerned about deepfakes in other realms where we don't have any legislation at all.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So, I mean, it covers campaigns and candidates, but we're seeing all kinds of people who would not be covered by such legislation, creating fake images, very convincing fake images, using them to drive false narratives about events like the recent hurricanes and the federal response. So how would regulation address that?
This is a really good question, and the reason I think the legislature made the decision to just focus on elections is that was a clear, narrow place where you could show the harm, and it's not quite as clear where is there a free speech line, where is there harm to an individual. On the other hand, these are potentially individuals, right? If a deepfake is made of an individual, that is potentially extremely damaging to that person's reputation. A person could lose their job. A person could lose, even if it is later shown to be, a fake, they could lose the confidence of, of their neighbors and friends. And so that probably is something, we need to look at. Does, fraud and defamation law actually need to be updated just to include these sorts of things? So there are a number of places where, we've got a little toehold, and I think that's really important, right? That having gone through the process of passing one piece of legislation, which New Mexico did fairly early, in part due to our short session, right? That bill clearly had to come out quickly in order to have any impact on this year's election. So that's good, and I think the important thing is to keep taking steps, from that initial position. I think that also applies to the transparency legislation that Chris has been talking about, that it's a really necessary first step to even understand that an algorithm or AI was used in making a decision. But the knowledge that it was used, or even the knowledge of what factors went into it, isn't necessarily the full protection for a person, right? You also have to have some process that a person can, file an appeal, right? This is why we hate it when the customer service person says, well, the computer told me, or that's the policy, right? And then that's the end of the conversation. So I think because there's so much uncertainty about how these tools will affect us, having that flexibility, that ability to challenge what these, AIs and algorithms are putting out there is a really important piece of the puzzle.
Chris, I'm just anticipating free speech challenges around this.
For deepfakery?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about, there's one this past week, little girl in a canoe, very sad, life jacket, puppy, in one of the hurricanes. She's totally fake. And
well, I'm glad she had a fake life jacket too.
when this is brought to bear eventually through various social media and other things, other fact checkers, a prominent person from the Republican National Committee from Georgia actually said something to the effect, it was in an NPR story, like, it doesn't really matter if it's not a real image. It's somehow highlighting an essential truth.
Right.
So free speech seems a pitfall here.
It is, and well, so yeah, one of it is like, well, I want to make sure that what happened to her puppy, you know. It's like there was the famous ad during the Cold War of the little girl picking a flower, and then there's a mushroom cloud in the background.
Right, for LBJ.
But
Yeah.
no one thought that a real little girl was being nuked in that ad, right? They understood this is propaganda. They understood this is staged. If you page down to the bottom of Google News, you'll find that, for instance, a lot of war footage, which is reported to be from Ukraine or from the war in the Middle East, turns out to be from video games, because video games have gotten so realistic that people can often mistake video game tanks for real tanks and so on. So I think it is very corrosive, but you're right that it is at some level speech, and I honestly don't know. It's like free speech is fine if I am speaking to you, right? Or if I am standing on the street corner. But what if I can disguise myself as you, right? Is that still protected free speech? What if I can disguise myself as somebody who doesn't even exist, like that little girl? There was no little girl whose consent was violated because there's no little girl. So a lot of these laws, there's a big loophole there. And also with social media, now, you know, we have these megaphones that we can use to, you know, amuse or frighten or tick off each other. And, you know, this is not the kind of speech that the founders of the nation had in mind. But of course, I also believe very strongly in free speech. So I honestly, I don't have a clear picture of what we are going to do or what we should do, but I'm very worried about the corrosive effect. And you referred to this, Melanie, briefly. It's already happening that now real things are being called fake. We've already heard people saying, oh, the Access Hollywood tape, that was a deep fake. And so now, you know, people are not going to be able to trust any photographic or any video evidence, any audio, unless, there's some trusted person who, maybe we'll go back to the days of, you know, personal testimony. I was standing behind the door and I heard Senator so-and-so make this deal with that executive, you know. Is that what is going to go? Are we going to go backwards and have sworn testimony from eyewitnesses? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to the notion of truth and debate in our society.
I wish we could end on a more hopeful note, but there is a 60-day session coming up, and no doubt that will play a part in it. And clearly, there will be more to keep talking about on this. So I want to thank you both for coming on, having a really enlightening, intriguing conversation.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.